I love my country. Always have. So when I proudly raised a massive American flag in front of my home for the 4th of July, I never expected the HOA to come knocking. They claimed it was too distracting, too big, and against aesthetics. But this wasn't about rules. It was about control. So I gave them something truly unforgettable. If they thought my flag was too much, wait till they saw what I replaced it with hovering over the entire neighborhood. The flag that started it all. My name is Mark Henderson, a 42-year-old Air Force veteran living in a peaceful, upscale suburban neighborhood in North Carolina. My home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, tucked under a canopy of old oak trees. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved to each other, kids rode bikes until dusk, and the scent of backyard barbecues wafted through the air on weekends. At least, it used to be like that, until the HOA got out of control. I'd lived here for 6 years, and during that time I had always kept my property spotless, paid my dues, and attended the occasional HOA meetings without causing waves. But everything changed last July. It started innocently enough. I installed a 20-foot flagpole in my front yard and proudly hoisted a 5-by-8-foot American flag, a symbol of the country I'd served. With Independence Day just around the corner, I figured it would be a good way to celebrate and honor fellow veterans in the neighborhood. My neighbors complimented it. Even the kids stopped to salute. But not everyone was thrilled. Cue Karen Witherspoon, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog and current president of the HOA board. She lived 3 houses down in a modern brick McMansion with perfect hedges, a koi pond, and an inflated sense of authority. You know the type. Clipboard in one hand, binoculars in the other, and a permanent scowl like someone just parked on her lawn. 2 days after the flag went up, I received a notice taped to my door. Dear Mr. Henderson, your flagpole violates the neighborhood aesthetic standards. The flag is too large, and the height of the pole is disruptive to the visual harmony of the community. Please remove it within 7 days or face fines. Sincerely, HOA Board President Karen Witherspoon. Too large? Disruptive? I read the community guidelines. Nothing in them prohibited a 20-foot flagpole or a 5-by-8-foot flag. So I did what any rational person would do. I responded. Dear Karen, the flag stays. Respectfully, Mark Henderson. 3 days later, I was fined $150. A week after that, another $250. When I tried to appeal at the monthly HOA meeting, Karen shut me down mid-sentence, claiming I was being unpatriotic about the rules. I laughed out loud, which didn't go over well. Your property isn't a military base, Mr. Henderson, she said, flipping through her printed emails. This is a residential community. If everyone put up giant flags, what kind of image would we project? One of pride and freedom, I offered. Dead silence. I left that meeting with a bigger target on my back than ever before. Over the next few weeks, Karen escalated her efforts. She started measuring the grass on my lawn with a ruler. She left passive-aggressive notes about my recycling bins being too visible from the street. She even emailed the city to question if my flagpole had a proper permit. It was exhausting. But then something happened that pushed me over the edge. On the morning of July 4th, Independence Day, I woke up to find my flag missing. Gone. The pole was still standing, but the flag had been cut down. The metal clips were snapped clean off. No note, no explanation. Just a quiet, early morning theft. That was the moment I decided. If they didn't like the flag, they were going to hate what came next. I had 3 key advantages. 1, I'm a licensed drone operator. 2, I still had friends in aviation. 3, and I had money. So I called an old buddy from the Air Force, now working in private air advertising. I asked him if it was possible to rent a blimp. Not just any blimp. A fully wrapped, LED-lit, patriotic flying monster. He thought I was joking. I wasn't. Within 2 weeks, it was ready. At exactly 8 a.m. on a sunny Saturday morning, the neighborhood was shaken awake by the gentle whirr of an enormous red, white, and blue blimp rising over the rooftops. Plastered on one side, "Land of the Free, flag too big? Think again." And on the other, a massive, waving digital animation of the American flag. It hovered 300 feet above my property, completely legal under FAA height regulations for tethered blimps in residential zones. I had even filed the paperwork with the city. The HOA couldn't touch me. Within an hour, residents flooded the cul-de-sac with coffee cups and lawn chairs. Kids took selfies. Elderly veterans from down the street came and shook my hand. Karen, on the other hand, stormed out of her house in a silk bathrobe and pearls, screaming about airspace violations and calling the police. When the officers arrived, they asked if the blimp was causing danger or blocking traffic. It wasn't. In fact, one of the officers saluted me and asked if his kids could take a photo. Karen shrieked and ran back inside. I may or may not have heard her say, "I'll call the FAA myself." Please do, Karen. I had the permits, and my buddy's company had everything in legal order. We were untouchable. But I wasn't done yet. Later that evening, the blimp lit up again, this time with fireworks-themed visuals and a 20-minute audio recording of Karen's HOA meeting rants played on loop. Yes, she had uploaded the meetings to the community website. I just took clips where she mocked my flag, insulted veterans, and talked down to residents. It was all public record. She couldn't sue me. She couldn't fine me. She couldn't stop it. By the end of that weekend, my front yard had turned into a symbol of resistance, and the HOA was in full meltdown. The day after I put up the blimp, I woke up to chaos. Dozens of neighbors were standing on their lawns, looking up and pointing at the sky. Some were filming, others cheering, and a few, especially the HOA board, were red with fury. The blimp, 100 feet long and proudly waving the stars and stripes, hovered directly above my property. It was secured by heavy-duty tethers, and a licensed aviation team monitored its positioning to ensure it didn't drift or pose any hazards. I walked outside with my coffee, waved to the neighbors, and saluted the flag. People clapped. One man from down the block shouted, "Best flag ever!" That evening, I got a knock at the door. It was Nancy, the HOA president, flanked by two of her loyal board members, Gary and Deborah. All three wore matching beige polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched like a badge of shame. Nancy didn't waste time. "This is a violation of aerial decorum." I blinked. "Excuse me? You can't just float a giant blimp above the neighborhood. You've violated several bylaws." I crossed my arms. "Which ones specifically?" She flipped open a binder. Yep, the same one from last time, and began reading off vague lines about neighborhood consistency, visual distractions, and unapproved large-scale displays. "That's cute," I said. "Did you bring the FAA documentation I sent you? The city permits? The licensed crew list?" Nancy narrowed her eyes. "Permits don't override HOA aesthetics." I smiled. "You know what does override HOA aesthetics? Federal law." She turned red. Gary chimed in. "Look, we're willing to let this go if you take it down voluntarily." I laughed. "That's what you said about my original flag. I took it down and replaced it with something bigger." They didn't respond. Nancy gave me one last glare and said, "You're making a mockery of the neighborhood." "No, Nancy," I said with a grin. "I'm making a statement." Escalation. Within 48 hours, the HOA had filed a formal complaint with the city. Unfortunately for them, the city officials, after verifying my permits, threw out the complaint. One city clerk even called me to say he loved the creativity and patriotism. But the HOA wasn't done. They held an emergency meeting, which I secretly attended via Zoom under a neighbor's account, Shout out to Steve from Lot 16. The agenda? 1. Discuss how to pressure the city further. 2. Draft a neighborhood petition to demand the Blimp's removal. 3. Consider changing the HOA bylaws to include aerial restrictions. Their desperation was glorious. The petition flopped hard. Most neighbors supported me. Some even asked for mini flag balloons for their yards. One veteran neighbor, Mr. Daniels, offered to fund a second blimp for July 4th. Nancy was losing control, so she turned to the last trick in her petty arsenal: media shaming. Local news drama. A few days later, a local news van pulled up. The reporter, a young guy named Zach, wanted to do a story on the giant American flag blimp causing HOA outrage. He interviewed me on my lawn. I told the truth, how the HOA overreached, how I followed every legal step, and how I simply stood up for my rights. I even mentioned the absurdity of being told my original flag was too big. That night, the segment aired. It showed me saluting the blimp, neighbors clapping, and Nancy trying to cover her face when the reporter approached her. The headline: Patriot versus HOA, neighborhood divided by blimp drama. Spoiler: the neighborhood was not divided. The final meeting. The next HOA meeting was packed. Even people who hadn't shown up in years attended. I stood up during public comments. I move to introduce a new motion, I said, that any future changes to HOA rules require a 2/3 majority vote and must not infringe on individual homeowners' constitutional rights. There was murmuring. Nancy objected, of course, but the members had had enough. They voted. Motion passed. I didn't stop there. I filed my candidacy for the next HOA board election. By the end of the month, I was elected HOA president. First order of business: protect homeowner rights, reduce frivolous complaints, and honor every veteran in the community with their own mini flagpole kit. Sponsored by yours truly. Epilogue: The Blimp's Legacy. Eventually, I took the blimp down, after a respectful month of display and a killer 4th of July barbecue that even Nancy grudgingly attended. I didn't need to keep it up forever. Its message had already soared far above the rooftops and into the hearts of every neighbor tired of being bossed around. And Nancy? She quietly resigned from the board 2 months later. Rumor has it she moved to a condo with no HOA. If you're enjoying these epic HOA revenge stories and love a good twist of justice, make sure to subscribe to the channel. One click helps us grow, and trust me, the next story might just be your favorite yet. Hit subscribe. Let's keep the petty drama rolling.